Hey everybody, this is John Murray, and you're watching Pete Turner and I on the Break It Down show.
Boom. I love that I get to do this. I love that we get to talk about these things. One of the things I quite often say to our brothers and sisters who are in the special operations world is that we don't have a beret, a pin, a badge. We have a badge, but nobody cares about that badge.
Yeah,
We don't have a trident. We don't have these things that let people know just how challenging and special our job is. So I thought we'd spend some time today, kind of talking about that, but also like where we should be, where we could be, what was the best, what is just the next step that we could take in terms of being counterintelligence agents, being human collectors, and going down that road. What are your thoughts initially, just in general, about? Look, I know we've talked about this, but it's always interesting. How do you know when someone in our field is good? Like, how did you know when you got good? Did you get good?
it's funny. First of all, I don't know if I ever got good. I agree with you completely that there's no, there's no pin, there's no, no special designator for agents or combat agents or the like. And it's a tough world. It's really hard to get buy-in, on your own wiles if you ever develop them. And I don't know when you know you're good, or I guess what I would say is the agents that I think were the best that I served with never knew they were good. I think about
Yeah.
some of the folks that we were with in Germany and stuff, and some folks that I really respected, and they probably never thought they were good or great, certainly, but I think it was just that they were dedicated. And I think that plays into it more than anything else, because it is thankless. There's as well as I do, it doesn't end after the night of drinking in the bar. Then you got to write all your reports. So, you're back at it for another 4 hours, 5 hours.
I think I'm back. Jesus,
Oh, I
this
was
Wi-Fi thing.
So yeah,
Yes.
I think people, it would, it's a benefit for especially those folks that we support to really understand what goes into the work.
Mm.
You know,
If you do get good, it's going to be in a very specific element of
yeah,
what it is that we do in the counterintelligence world. Like you and I both know, there's a heavy law enforcement background, and it's a good default. There's a lot of training. You can go to FLETC and all these other courses and everything,
right.
and that's not my world. I would instantly say I can help run a team, but I don't know the first thing about the law enforcement side of this. Or like Chief Zach, I found out that Brian Zach went to the LA field office and basically started it up. It was a joint task force kind of thing with the
Mm-hmm.
FBI.
Yeah,
And so there was a billet, but there was no job description.
right.
Like there's all these things you had to invent it, and that will for
Yeah.
sure make you feel like, boy, just to exist on this playing field will take me years, and likely the whole entire time you're there.
Well, I agree with that completely and wholeheartedly. Going from being a CI non-commissioned officer to a warrant, I felt like I had gotten to a certain level of proficiency as an NCO, and then I became a tech, and I was at square zero again. I
Yeah.
was way back to the beginning, and you're right. It is every single position, if you will, is extremely nuanced. There's it's a niche. I
Yeah.
laugh when I see these, the spy movies and stuff that we all watch,
Oh my gosh.
and you're like, in your brain, you're going, "That's not how any of this works. It would never work that way at all." Nobody
Yeah.
knows all that information. It'd be nice. So yeah,
Yeah.
I think that can't be overstated enough. Is that it's a very it's a niche world, and it's people sometimes don't realize you may just be going after the tiniest bit of information, and you may not even know what it is.
That's right. And you may not know it when you have it.
Right.
It may be relevant 2 weeks later, or it may lock into place,
Or
and then
you're
that will
Yep.
open a whole new adventure for
Exactly.
you.
Exactly. Yeah. Sure.
let's take ego out of this for a second.
Mhm.
To the good and to the bad, we definitely suffer on both sides of that in our field because everybody's smart and everybody
Mhm.
is working hard to be great at their job and learn a lot about it. But
Yeah.
um, I got to stay at the ground level and go off the camp over and over and
Mhm.
over and over again.
Yeah.
And I got to learn how to deal with commanders so that you
Yeah.
could put me in any unit in any conflict and I would be relevant. I would know how to blend in and I would know how to bring more weight than just one dude normally should.
Right.
And when
Right.
I encounter people who are JSOC or whatever, and we talk about collection, they're shutting up and they're listening when I'm talking. And so
Mhm.
those are hallmarks of like, oh, this guy's good. He knows what he's doing. He's going to be value added. What the fuck are we talking about? Let's just go do the work, right?
Yeah.
But it's rare to stay at that level. Like you said, you become an NCO, then you're a platoon sergeant, then you put
Right.
your packet in. Now you're a warrant officer,
Right.
and you're more and more chained to a desk. You might go run a team, but
It's very
it's
different. Very different.
right.
There were times, honestly, as a warrant that I would have given anything to be an E5 again,
Right.
or to be an E4 again. I was very, and I went to the agents course as an E5. So that in itself also, there were little like stepping stones along the way that I
Yeah.
knew I missed,
Yeah.
because I was already an NCO.
Yeah.
Of course, with ego in the mix,
Mm.
you want to seem proficient. You're a non-commissioned officer, you're whatever, and um, you've got sometimes youngsters looking at you, going, "Man, he doesn't know what the hell he's doing." So you got to learn quick, like you're saying. You got to learn really quickly um, how to be successful, how to be competent and confident. Um, and you have to learn how to deal with various commanders at different
Yeah.
levels all over, because we all know, for as many different, like base camps in the Balkans, there was that many different personalities. It was
Yeah.
kind of the Wild West. Whatever that base commander wanted, and rightfully so, is what they
Yeah.
got.
Yeah.
So it was definitely balancing a lot of, you balance personalities. You try to figure out what's the best way to get, really, to your point, what's the best way to get my butt off of this base camp and out in the public? Because if I can't do that, I may as well be changing oil.
Yeah. My buddy John and I were talking about working in conflict zones. Anything that involves human interaction with the local people, whatever it's the
Right.
local nationals, the local forces, police, whatever it's going to be. And there's a couple things that have to happen. Yeah, he would say, and I would agree with him. You need to have 2 doses of initiative. Because it's one thing to say, "Hey, we need to get off the camp," and the sergeant major's like, "Well, you guys are going to go on this detail today." And you got to be like, "Sergeant major, we're getting off this camp,
Yeah.
and the moment you see us relax, then you can put us to work."
Yeah.
And you got to be able to have that initiative and that extra dash of initiative to overcome the normal speed and trajectory of an army unit.
Yeah.
One of the other things is a healthy disregard for the rules,
Yeah.
because most of what we do is squarely in the charcoal, not even in the gray.
It's not even the grid. No, I was going to say it's definitely outside of the bounds of what the the rules usually are, and by design,
Yeah.
um, it needs to be. You're not going to be uh, on top of your game as a collector if you have to watch every P. Now, within the job, we all know what the P's and Q's are, and they are considerable. So
Right.
those little, to me, the pinprick stuff, got to be in groups of whatever, got to be in this many. That stuff was kind of ancillary, just a pain in the butt.
Mhm.
That stuff to me, I didn't mind bending because I knew the mission had to come first.
Right.
And getting the information we needed had to be the first and only priority. So, it is living outside the bounds of, I guess, proclivity.
Yeah. Going into this whole thing about being good and getting off the camp and getting the commander, what he wants, there's also an element, and maybe this is a little too advanced, but we have to be able to look into the future. We have to be able to, like, when I go on a patrol, the thing I tell someone who's junior to me in terms of their collection, I'm never the senior ranking guy because I didn't have any rank, but I would say, like, our job is to get something that no one else has the ability to get on this.
Exactly.
We have access to this information. We have to figure out what it is. We won't know it until we hear it. And once we hear it, we have to take all of the dirt off of it and get to that piece
Yeah.
of gold as much as possible. Does that resonate?
No, absolutely. Absolutely does. You know, you know, I used to, in my head, scream, you know, in our battle staff meetings on base, when they'd look at me and go, and here's the PIR I need from you, or here's what I need from you this week. And I'd be like, just 7 pages? That's all? You know, it was almost as if, I think that sometimes commanders felt we were going and having like a summit and inviting people to a boardroom. And we're sitting down and we're saying, okay, now you fill in these blanks and you fill in these blanks.
Yeah.
And so again, that, you know, but it falls on us to educate. And so, you know, you have to be able to get people to understand, if you're going to be meeting with somebody for 2 hours, the meat of what you're going after may not occur for an hour and 25 minutes.
Right.
You know, but you still are out there for that time.
Yeah.
It may be a tiny little nugget. Like you said, we knock the dirt off and it's a pearl. Yeah. But we won't know until we get to do the work on it. So, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely correct.
When someone hands me a packet of PIRs, or these are information requirements, when someone hands me a packet of these, honestly, I'll just be honest with you, John, I ignore it. I don't read that fucking thing.
Yeah.
Because my job, where I'm at, and I'm not talking about lower ranking people, I know what the commander needs. I look at the commander on the wall and it has, here's my mission statement.
Yep.
If I'm feeding that hole, which is, you know, whatever it is, I always talk about this, like close with and destroy, protect the force, enable the enablers, teach and train the local forces. That's a very common, very boilerplate thing. They'll all say they have something special in there, but that's what it is. If you're answering things within that, you're in the PIR window. You don't need some guy who sits in a room who's nowhere near combat, right? So my job is to get better information than what's on that PIR list. And by the way, on that PIR list is like, who are the terrorists in the area? I can't ask that question.
Which is like, that's my favorite. I think that's PIR question number one everywhere I've ever been. Who are the bad guys in my AO? Well, everybody. It's everybody.
Yeah. And you want me to not find it out? Ask me to ask that. Because you can't say, hey, I'm Pete. I'm with the American forces. Who are the bad people in the area?
That's, you know, I used to get, we would call it like the Hummer window PIR or grabs. We'd be on our way out the gate and we'd have an S2 running up to us. Hey, you got to ask. And I'm like, you're yelling at me through a window.
Yeah.
I got nothing for you. You know, it's not going to work that way. And it is a tough balance. You know, I think, you know, certainly I've been out now longer than I was in, but looking at, you know, just the simplest things of getting off base camps and things like that. I don't know how it goes now. Certainly been out of it a while, but those simple little things, I think that's where, you know, you can start making headway by overcoming those, you know, getting past that, you know, I can't let these guys off my base camp because XYZ may happen. Well, worse could happen if we don't.
Yeah.
It's getting commanders to that level of understanding beforehand is crucial. Absolutely.
Okay. So let's spend some time right here because this is a critical skill. Also, something we all had to learn, and we all basically, the teams that got off the post learned it was you have to partner with CA, you have to partner with PSYOPs, you have to partner with whoever's leaving the camp.
Yep.
So that you can get off the camp often enough, because we were bound up by legitimate security concerns. Right. In our little cluster, we could do a 2-vehicle convoy, which was meant for patrolling from one camp to the other.
Yeah.
So we just stretched that rule as far as we could. You know.
Yeah, of course. You know,
that access to the battle zone, whatever it is, even if it's not that permissive, so the commander can understand what might happen. That is our job. That is our risk to take on for him to go find these things out.
To me is that's the crux of force protection. Is, you know, that commander may not know what they don't know what they don't know.
Mm.
And until you can show them that, you know, exactly what you said, you know, you're not going to get where you need to be. We were very fortunate. We were out near Bosanski Samach on this little lake,
Mm.
and we got hooked up with an SF PSYOPs team, and they were awesome. And that's where we started getting our access. Every time we heard their Humvee start up, I was like,
Mhm.
"Let's go, guys, we're out." And it really helped us with 1-1 Cav establish bona fides. You know, look, we're going with them. And then, you know, eventually we got a civil affairs team as well,
Yeah.
and we all rolled together, and it was a good relationship. You know, it just everything kind of melded.
Mhm.
And certainly, you know, those are things again that should be commonplace in garrison,
Yeah.
so that you're not, you know, to me that's kind of like, you know, giving somebody, you know, the keys to a Ferrari, but you know, letting him drink an hour and a half before he's driving it. You know,
Yeah.
it doesn't make
Yeah.
sense. So,
Like legitimately, you're given a Tesla, and you like don't have YouTube to learn how to drive it. You know, like, legitimately,
exactly,
like that's exactly what
exactly.
it's like. I want to get to Joseph's question. Before I do that, though, I also
Yeah,
want to congratulate this guy here right down below, Chase Tasson.
yeah.
Today, got his letter approving him to transition from infantry over to counterintelligence. How great is
Nice,
that?
nice. Good for you. You're gonna enjoy it. The food's better.
What's your advice to a guy who just today got his letter? Like he's going to go to the field office that's on their concern, right?
Yep.
And he's going to try to work on OJTing and getting out of the infantry because he needs to right now. Like the
Yeah.
time is now. Hopefully they do
Yeah.
that for him. But what's your advice as a chief? Like, hey kid, this is what I want you to do.
Yeah. Honestly, eyes open, ears open. You just pay attention, sponge it all in. You know, you're gonna. I mean, obviously, you're smart enough to be where you're going. Really, is just pay attention to everything around you. The good will poke itself out just as readily as the bad, and you know, you've got to create your own. You know, your own kind of paradigms of what is acceptable. Always create your non-negotiable. Period.
Mm.
You know, you got to have a non-negotiable. There are things that you can't compromise on ever.
Mm.
And when you know, and he already knows that he's an NCO. If you do those things, especially in the intel world, you'll get a good reputation. You know,
Yeah.
I think in the intel world more than, and I'm sorry, my phone keeps going off. I think in the intel world more than most places, um, if you get the reputation of being a shitbag, you're a shitbag.
Yeah.
You know, I mean that's just it's the unfortunate truth. You know, if you screw up badly enough a few times, you can't climb out of that hole.
Infantry is a small community. Intel was smaller, especially
Yeah, yeah,
counterintelligence. Yeah.
exactly.
What
It's
are the advantages of transitioning from infantry as opposed to all the other people that you saw?
great question. Great question. Prior to becoming an agent, all of my time was in the 82nd at Bragg. So it it was a culture shock because I went from, you know, a million miles an hour to CI time. I had very little. Even the, you know, the agents at Bragg were. I mean, these guys were strack. And then, you know, my first assignment as an agent was Wiesbaden.
Yeah.
So I'm in this beautiful Cush field office in Germany going. I mean, I could literally throw a baseball from one end of the airbase to the other on 2 or 3 bounces in a roll that might get out the other gate. It was just a culture shock. I think the biggest benefit or the biggest perk, um, you're not going to sleep on the ground as much.
Yeah. But
You
you
know,
know what it's like to sleep on the ground.
yeah, it's still, well, that's the thing, and you know that I think where it helped me was that I never forgot where I came from. You know, I was a '96 Romeo
Yeah.
at Bragg,
One of
and
the most dangerous jobs in the world.
one of the dumbest. It's almost
Yeah.
as bad as being on a crab boat. Uh, and I was one of the happiest people in the world when my packet got approved because and for me the big step up, I was like, well, if I stay at Bragg, these guys get COTS when they go to the field. I was like,
Yeah.
that's going to be great. So Wiesbaden was like Club Med. That was like being given a but honestly, I think the good thing is cutting your teeth in a field office like that. You're going to learn some collection.
Yeah.
You'll do some good stuff. So it's a great place. Being in the States as an agent is not where you want to be. You want to be overseas. You want to be
Right.
where there's things to do rather than background investigations and the stuff none of us want to do.
Yeah. I've been encouraging Chase to get into the manuals, the pubs, the regs, and really grab a
Yeah,
mastery of that so
yeah,
that
yeah,
even if you can't apply it yet, it's in there and you know how to look it up and you'd be like, actually, boom.
yeah.
And then the other thing is just to practice asking questions, learn what it is to ask a question and get something out of it.
That's good. Yeah. Yep.
And you can do that by yourself. You can out loud role play with yourself.
Heck yeah.
And it sounds crazy, but you learn like, oh, the next question should be this or that. And
Yeah.
there's a lot of anything like that you developed at all. Any other things besides self role playing?
Yeah. Questioning for sure. Launch yourself softball questions and answer them yourself, but then throw yourself curves. Try to get in that mindset of while the rest of the world is playing checkers, be playing chess. You never let them see you sweat. I think that's one of the things that I encourage young agents to do is get your game face.
Yeah.
Because there will, if you're we all want to deploy. Everyone, if you're an agent, you don't want to deploy, you're in the wrong line of work. When you deploy, something will happen eventually that's going to catch you off guard. You can't let your emotions or your face give it away.
Right.
Ever. You got to be deadpan, or be able to laugh. Just be able to laugh. Those are tools that you kind of pick up. And honestly, I had Jonas. I had some good old warrants when I first got to Germany that were really, really good. And taught me a lot.
Yeah.
God, what was Jonas's last name?
Garland. He's been on the show before.
Garland. Yeah, he was awesome. He was awesome. Smart guy.
Yeah.
Smart guy.
Earlier, Joseph Grant asked a great question, and I think we should both. That's just him saying congratulations. He asked a question about developing targets. So we're not talking sources, right? So this is a great question because someone will say, "Go find a needle in a haystack," and I'm like, "Dude, there's needles everywhere.
Yep.
Exactly. I'm bringing you all kinds of needles. You got to tell me what needles you like, but I'm gonna bring you. If I'm not doing my job." And not every day is a collection day, but every day I'm going to bring you something you didn't know. That's my job, right? Exactly. I'm going to bring you a needle.
Exactly. So we did media collection a lot. We would do days where if we didn't have a mission going out, we'd scour papers. We would do media stuff and get that stuff to the local commanders because they don't have time for it. Or they may read an article and not understand what the implications are on some, because we dealt with all the different общиnas, little towns. They may not know what's going on in the town just over the bridge because it's now Serb territory. And being able to bounce all those things off is valuable stuff. So there's always stuff to do. And I think that's an important point too, Pete. There's always stuff to do. Always.
That when you target things, sometimes the target is location. Just, hey, this is where we get to go today. You may never come back here, and you have a set of questions so you can adapt to whatever comes out, right? So when you and I talk about questioning, I think about like a basic load of questions. There are 7 different magazines, and then I've got a bandolier of other magazines that play. Oh, you're a farmer and you're a Serb. Exactly. Into my chamber goes the Serb farmer question thing, and if that doesn't work, it doesn't get me where I want to go. Then it goes to social connection. Then it goes, and I'm looking to determine, right?
Absolutely right. Yeah. Yeah. Good.
No, I was going to say, how do you, because we're always sussing out the relationship of the person, and you don't want to diminish somebody because somebody who's probably valuable isn't likely to be like, I'm valuable, and if they say that, you're like, this guy's full of shit. Exactly. So how do you, when you're like, leading your guys, how do you figure out who's worth time and who do you need to cut bait on? Because a lot of people you have to cut bait on.
You get the crazies. We had a crazy file we had like 18 pounds of crazy file in the Balkans. It's tough. vetting information that they've given in the past. Is it too good? If it's too good, if it seems too good to be true, you're getting played.
Oh boy.
And that's a bad thing, because you walked in showing your butt if that happens. It's just finding that person. At first, I think there's a lot of personality issues that have to mesh. And then it's how far can you get with that person before you start seeing the return on that investment that you're making with them in time, and God knows how much alcohol we purchase for them and things like that. So I don't think that there's ever really at the ground pounding level. I don't think that I didn't personally get a lot of time to say this is valid or this isn't valid. We would report, and if whatever feedback we got, we knew that was the right avenue to go in.
We don't get a lot of feedback, do we?
Not a lot. You may get told, hey, one of your reports got briefed at this level last week. Good job. You don't know what report. You don't know, why it was briefed. I think that's something that really, if there was a way to fix, there would be a better feedback loop, so what you're doing is valid. But I think, again, as long as you know what the mission is and you have those requirements, and you've created that relationship with that local commander, you're going to be doing valid work. I guess you should be able to take feedback and not expect it to be a certain level. I mean, if that commander comes by and pats you on the back and says, hey, that worked out, thanks, that's great feedback. That's better than you're going to get in most places. I think I lost you, Pete. Are you there?
All right, I'm finally back. Jesus, my Wi-Fi. I had to open the door to let more Wi-Fi in.
Put more Wi-Fi in.
These things that you're talking about are these are the challenges that aren't in the books.
Yeah. Uh-oh.
All right. These challenges you're talking about, they're not in the books, right? We have to learn how to do these dances. We have to learn how to relate to the sergeant major, the commander, the two, how to integrate when a new unit comes in. What are your thoughts? How do you get ahead of the unit trust piece, right? So that when you show up somewhere, and usually we're augmentees, right? Either you're direct supporter, but you never really belong to that unit, like in the way that they understand. And if you do belong to them and you are a germane asset, you still have to have the trust, the confidence of the commander. And when you're in garrison, you have no reason to know that dude.
You don't know them. You don't meet them. You are thrust into their AO, and you're given, you have to tell them, I need food, I need water, I need commo, I need places to sleep, and you're going to get very little from me. So that's not a great way to start a relationship. When you walk onto that base camp, the first thing any sergeant major sees is 5 more bodies for guard duty, or compete or whatever else. And then, when they are doing their the big thing that we tried to stomp out was formations in a combat zone. But, they'd ask me why my soldiers weren't in formation, because they're not your soldiers, they're mine.
Right.
But you have to be able, if you can't take that bitter piece of roof tile and put some jam on it and make them at least think it tastes good, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. You're not going to get anything done.
One thing that I always thought about doing, and I never ran a team, right? I was more of like a one guy thing, or a leader on a 2-person element with no authority to lead, just the senior collection expert, right? But if I went and did Bosnia again, and I was Bart Dachko or Brian Kilgore, who was our NCO, I would go to the sergeant major and say, hey, listen, I got a couple options for you. One, why don't you go out with us on a patrol and see what we do?
Yep, absolutely.
Two, if what we bring back on Sunday isn't valuable, then the next Sunday we'll do a detail.
Yeah, yeah,
You
that
know,
we
and
do similar stuff, absolutely, and it's necessary, and you may just be, you may be needing to find out, are they is the line for American alcohol open up again, and you're just going by some little shop,
right,
going in and doing what you usually do, but checking and seeing what their stock is while you're in there, and the sergeant major is thrilled,
yeah,
absolutely thrilled. He got off the base camp for 6 hours or whatever.
right,
He's he's not leading a group of people. He's just observing,
yeah,
and you get to see something he hasn't seen.
yeah,
And those things go a million miles, and they're necessary. It's something that, you said earlier, these things aren't in a book. They should be.
they should be.
They
That's why we're doing this show.
they spend so much time teaching us rapport building skills with people, with subjects or targets or whatever you want to call them. A lot of folks don't get the rapport building inside the wire that has to come first. And so all the good stuff that they teach us, collection techniques and questioning and blah, 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 none of it matters if you can't, look at that local commander and say, hey, listen, this is what I can give you, and I will. And if you have things that you need to know, tell me what they are, and I'll do my best to get it for you. And it really came down to education more than anything else. But it depends though, because if you've got a good chief, you're going to spend a lot of time outside the wire. If you've got one that doesn't have an understanding of human nature and just people skills, you can say to every E4 and below, you guys are going to be in the motor pool for the next 6 months. You just can't let that happen. It's a disservice to the mission. It's a disservice to what we do.
Right.
Nobody's going to re-up and stay an agent. You look at retention issues now.
Oh my God.
Nobody's going to re-up to stay an agent if the last 3 deployments they went on, they learned how to, rip a transmission out of an old Hummer.
Can you imagine? Yeah, I know you can imagine, because it does happen.
I've seen it.
Yeah.
And then you do run into having folks on your team that are really well-meaning, and an NCO from the base camp will say, "Hey, give me a hand with this," and next thing you know, they feel like they're like branch detailed out. Like, don't volunteer for stuff; just volunteer for what we do. So, but it's that those things there should be some type of a course along those lines.
I'm going to push back a little bit on the collection training as well. When I was talking to Brian Zach, he said, I went to FCITIC, and I'm like, why the fuck weren't we talking to this guy, as part of our pre-deployment training, to learn like the things he learned. I didn't even know he was FCITIC. I would have bugged him a lot more. We don't lean on our expertise nearly enough in the field, at least from our era, from my experience. But that, we have people that go to schools, and we don't send nearly enough agents to school. Not all kinds of schools.
I think we have all the schools obviously for agents are classified, and I think there becomes this mindset, and I don't know why the mindset exists, but there's this mindset that he went to FCITIC, don't talk to him about FCITIC. Or, he went to Strat D, don't talk to him about Strat D. And you're like, they should be spreading the wealth. Certainly there are things that they're not going to go into.
Right.
But there are so much value in the stuff that these guys, like JP Callahan he knew more about the Balkans, I think, than Archduke Ferdinand did. The guy was he knew his stuff. Dave Robertson was the same. They knew their stuff, and it was, to see that and go, wow, that's a superpower. He's been hiding it. We don't leverage the assets that we've already had. And I'm a proponent of sending young agents to every school that you can get them to, because our schools are very much more, it's almost like virtual reality. You're going to do it while you're there. It's not theory, it's not, even in the basic agents course, you're going to do some of this stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to look ridiculous doing it, but you're going to do it. You're going to walk, you're going to go to Tombstone and walk around for a few days. And they should, but there should be more, because, you're putting, I remember as a young private, cleaning the halls in the 313th MI. And there was it was actually in the commander's office was a poster, and it was one of the old Army issue posters. And it just said on it, "Let no man's soul cry out, had I the proper training." And I thought about that my whole career, Pete, because all I kept thinking was, we've got all these young agents running around the box, right? And how much tactical training have they had? Do they even know how to react to an ambush, in a vehicle? Or even if it just blew me away. And I'm thinking, man, we've got so many folks with so much ability, have so much go wrong. I was amazed I was amazed we didn't have more issues in Bosnia, to be honest with you. And I think
we were fortunate that wasn't a fight.
Yeah,
we didn't know that going in, but
yeah, we were very fortunate. It could have been very well. Our missions would have been very differently if there was more shooting going on. Our missions would have been very different.
I just wrote a post today on LinkedIn, and this guy named Amish, who's a military guy, he runs an ROTC program. I believe I'm getting all this right, in Idaho, and he was showing like a snowy field and like, this is good Army training. And I wrote, and I'm just referencing Amish. I wasn't referencing his post because his post is his post, but I'm saying, hey, look, we'd go to Aschaffenburg, right? And it would be possible, if you're an E4, that you laid on the ground in the middle of the night to guard something that wasn't in danger, because there was nothing to guard that wasn't already have somebody next to it.
Exactly.
And so there was a lot of time spent doing Army things, but not a lot of time. I was a role player, and I maybe played, and it wasn't all, we weren't there very long, but I maybe played less than 10 roles, right? I should be worn ragged playing roles.
Yeah, exactly. That we had role players, and I know you ran into these too. You'd have a role player where when you started doing your thing, they literally pull a script out of their pocket, read it in front of you, and folded it back up and put it away. And there's no training value in that.
Right.
You're not helping anybody.
I'm going to say this out loud too. Let me back up. When we were at Huachuca together, Nancy Richards, who was my NCO, she's like, "Hey, do you want to go to Strat D, the Strategic Debriefer course?" And I did, but I didn't know anything about it because it was such a damned secret. I couldn't, they had an open billet. I could have just walked across the street.
All I kept hearing was, you can't get in. That's all I kept hearing. I kept looking at the building going, but I know I can walk right in that door. I just know I can.
And so they kept it such a secret. It was sexy, but it wasn't interesting because I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how I would apply it. I didn't know if I could ever use it. I respect it, but you can't make things such a secret that you aren't available, right? Anyhow, let me go back to this other thing we were talking about. What were we just talking about? We were talking about before I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so you're my fucking Wi-Fi, my goddamn Wi-Fi. Where you're in the forest and you're doing Army training, and we have to do some Army training, especially with what our mission was. We had a big, gigantic mission. But you've got to spend time with density in terms of counterintelligence things that are hard. And that means the role players have to understand what the command's intent is for that training. I witnessed and I authored some training at Fort Polk for our little concluding pre-deployment class. And I went and I got to brief the role players. These are all Afghan dudes. And I'm like, here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to get after. And they're like, oh, no one's ever told us this. They just give us the sheet and we play it out. And they don't know like how to be a rabbit and stay just in front of that agent.
Right.
And so there's so much of that too, where when I'm doing these roles in Aschaffenburg, yes, I can play a role. Yes, I can memorize it. Yes, I know what to do, but I don't know what the intent of the training is. I'm just being something. And sometimes when we do have role players, there isn't an answer. And when I wrote my my scenario for Fort Polk there was no answer. It was a day in the life for a couple of days of an Army unit. And these guys would come up with these grand theories. And I'm like, you don't know enough to know anything. The point here is the pace is get out, right, talk, get out, right, talk. All these things over and over again.
Right. No, yeah. And that's a great point. I tried a couple of times to get assigned to either, Polk. People thought I was crazy, but helping to develop folks that are going to be in that tactical environment
Yeah.
it is, again, it's beyond necessary. It's a disservice to the youngsters that we want to keep and make into the next generation of chiefs, of warrant officers and the senior NCOs. It's a disservice if they're going to do one enlistment, and that enlistment, you look at Tom. I love Tom. He was. I mean, I loved him, but he had other than the time that he spent on my team, he hated being in the Army.
Right.
And it was like, man, if he was so smart. Now he's been with a 3-letter agency in DC for all these years. He was a brilliant guy. Nobody was using him the way that they should have used him, and that's where the ego comes in. And I think there's a lot of ego in the intelligence realm anyway. I think that's the biggest problem is ego.
How much did you feel like you were pressured from your leadership to mentor and develop agents?
My situation was a little unique only because I had spent so many years at Bragg doing Bragg stuff. And I honestly felt like I was pressured more to develop soldiers that could do CI rather than developing agents. I think that my skill set was looked at differently, and I didn't like that all that much because, I wasn't just a grunt. I felt as though I had every bit as much to offer as any other agent that had been in the field as long as I had. So, there's a lot of that too. There is this we, they mentality. And when somebody branches over or when somebody, leaves combat arms to go CI, I don't know if you remember Dudley Moore. You might have been, he might have got out before you got there, but Dudley was an SF guy or Dudley was a Ranger. And, he looked at me. I was jump master or assault qualified. He looked at me like I was just a grunt. And I was like, man, I don't want he's the guy that told me, oh, you're coming to V-Spot and I'm the NCOIC there. And I thought, I don't want to work for this guy. And it was nothing against him. Yeah. I wanted a different mindset. I had already been through that mindset.
Right.
I already had that kind of shoved down my throat for so many years. I don't think we do or historically, again, I've been out longer than I was in.
Sure, yeah.
But I think, there needs to be more of a time period spent really developing what are these people strong at? What are they best at? And what have they already done that we can move them away from and challenge them with something else? A big part of it is challenging folks. If you challenge young agents, that's why they became an agent in the first place, unless their recruiter really did lie to them. When you challenge a young agent, they want more. Do you remember Liz Hyde?
Sure.
Liz was great. She was a great collector. Nobody was challenging her.
Yeah.
And it blew me away. I was like, man, she is so smart. You could not, she would have gotten Slobodan Milosevic to tell you where Hitler was. I mean, she was just amazing at how well she did her job. But for the most part, she wasn't allowed to do her job. So, you lose really good people that way.
Yeah, I always felt like I was working so hard to stand out. I was competing with my peers in a competitive way, not in a destructive way.
Yep.
And all I got was grief for it. Like, okay, sure. Was I overly motivated? Was I pushing hard? Did I act out? Yeah, but I also was penned up.
And you never gotten grief for that. That's the stuff we could do a show on. Toxic military leadership.
Oh yeah.
That'd be a 3-hour show,
and I want to avoid that in this episode because
we'll avoid that completely. But
what are the cool things about this job? Like, because one of the reasons why I never tried to leave, invest in it, was the job was so great, and when you got to do it, oh my God, it was the adventure of a lifetime. So, what did you love about being a counterintelligence agent?
Oh man, the unknown. I loved that unknown.
Mm-hmm.
It was exhilarating. I got every bit as excited over, when we're in the IEBL and we're yanking weapons caches and we're interrogating the heck out of the folks at the weapons cache. I got as jazzed about that as jump master in a plane over Holland Drop Zone. You know, it was
Mhm.
just something that's the thing is if, you know, I think folks that really enjoy the mind game, and I don't mean that in a negative way. You know, people
Right.
say mind game and it automatically gets the connotation of playing mind games. But the, like I said earlier, playing chess while somebody else is playing checkers, that, you know, having to stay a step or two ahead and
Yeah.
knowing that what you're doing is dangerous.
Yeah.
That to me was exhilarating. That looking in somebody's eyes and know that I got them. I
Yeah.
got 'em, you know.
If I could have a small amount of money and I wanted to develop agents from within, I would send them to a foreign country, like we talked about, like in Germany, and I would make sure that every E4, that's the development zone, E4 and
Yeah.
below, maybe even E5, had an extra, say, $1,000 a month.
Oh,
And I just
sure.
want you out in the economy. I want
Oh,
you
yeah,
living in and amongst the Germans, the
yeah,
Poles, wherever you're at.
yeah,
And I want
absolutely.
you on the post as little as possible when the mission allows it, right?
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah.
we had a whole other professional mission, but there should be amount of time allotted towards like, hey, these guys got to work on their field craft.
Have to, have to.
And it was too easy to avoid that when I was in Germany. So all the other things I did, I should have taken, I don't know, 20% of the effort that I did put into correspondence courses or whatever it was, and put that into being off post and getting comfortable with the unknown of being in a foreign place.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's. I agree completely. You know, if somebody's going to go to like the, you know, I forget the name of the Mac, not Mac, one of the heavy equipment companies has a school they send people to.
Right.
You're not going to send them to that heavy equipment school with no money, no food, no, you know, you have to pay for them.
Yeah.
Like any job that will, you know, is going to pay you for the uniform you have to wear, or,
Right.
you know, supply the equipment you need. The equipment you need as an agent is time to
Oh,
get on. It's time. You know, the one thing that I think I was short of in my entire career was time.
mm,
Always time. And yeah, you know, there is, like you said, there is a mission that has to be done every day, all day, and that's the Army. You know, Army fun. And then at night, agents should be out. You know, an
yeah.
agent that's sitting in their barracks room or sitting, you know, in their apartment, they're not learning anything. But you have to pay them to do it. You know, you
Yeah.
can't expect them to. I mean, if all the money I spent at the Irish pub in Wiesbaden was my own money,
Right.
I'd be bankrupt. You got to get folks the training funds to do it, and that's, you know, that's the other issue is everything comes down to funding, and
Yeah.
you got to get past that. Got to get past that. Not
Yeah.
one life on the battlefield is worth saving money in garrison. So,
Yeah. And the you've done the expensive part. The person's already in Germany, and we're using Germany as an example, Italy, wherever they are, they're already there. So
yep.
now let's get them off of the post. And look, maybe you want to design a training program, maybe you don't, but you just want them off the post. And maybe
Yep.
that chief goes out and hangs out with them every now and then, just to see how they do, and they mentor from that. But I didn't get mentored at all.
That's the problem. You know, you would hope that, you know, in a perfect world, every agent that comes in gets hooked up with somebody who will mentor them and help them and guide them, but it doesn't happen that way.
Yeah.
You know, it is a numbers game. There's, you know, only so many. You'll have what, depending on the size of the field office, maybe 3, maybe 4 warrants at the most,
Yeah.
and
Right.
then 35, 40 agents. It's not a 1-to-1 ratio,
Right.
but there's certainly senior NCO leadership and NCO leadership that's more than capable of that. I mean,
Yeah.
look, they didn't teach me anything in warrant officer school that all of a sudden I was smarter than I was as a 7. You
Yeah.
know, I didn't, you know, leave the enlisted ranks and all of a sudden get all this knowledge dumped in my brain in warrant officer school.
Right.
That's not the case at all. In fact,
Yeah.
most of us get dumber when we go to warrant officer school. So it's, you know, there is the ability is there. I think if you make it a training requirement, that puts a different connotation on it. But
Mm.
you know, without having senior agents that are going to mentor folks, it's a tough road after that, you know, only
Yeah.
because you like with the Balkans, and we had so much lead up to the Balkans,
Oh
people.
my God.
Oh, it's Hohenfels,
Yeah.
Grafenwehr, all that garbage. with all the training and time we had to get ready for it, I still felt unprepared at first.
I was completely unprepared.
I
We
mean,
went
yeah.
range density. I didn't touch a 9mm.
That's right. And then, hey, here you go. Here's your 9mm.
Yeah, no, I wasn't allowed to have a 9mm, but I was allowed, Brian and I, because we were big oxes,
Yeah. Carried the 60.
allowed to. It's ridiculous. We were allowed to carry the M60 that we weren't authorized to shoot, but we couldn't touch a 9mm.
You
know,
remember, I don't even know why they bought our 50 cal out of the arms room. I think they took it out of the arms room just to dust it off.
Right. Our 60, to their defense, our 60 was broken, and that was a dumb thing. Anyhow, I don't want to get into that stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to manage a couple of things here at once. One of the things that I think we got the benefit of, though, in our job was we got to see the problems from a tactical and strategic point of view all at the same time. And so we're forced to adapt to that. But I find that exhilarating too, is how do I write something that is going to speak echelons above where I'll even know, right, but my words are in the CIA's hands. I mean, yep, potentially on the president's desk, right? Yep. And yep, so you're writing to an audience. That is a very unique skill and a contribution, because if you're a tanker, that's just not likely to happen.
Absolutely right. And there were, I was a 96 Romeo. So when I came over, putting together any kind of coherent sentences was not my strongest suit. So yeah, there are things that are definite critical skills that again, if you come in later, you didn't get them, because report writing in the course taught me how to write fast. You have to get it done overnight. So that didn't really teach me to write good reports. It just taught me to write a report. Right. And it takes some doing, like you said, to write a report that's comprehensive, accurate, reflects everything that happened the way it really happened, and your writing is at a level that a 1-star is not going to look at it and go, "This is garbage."
Yeah,
because that 1-star, we know that 1-star ultimately is not the decision maker. So if it's not written well, the 1-star throws it away. Probably should have been on the 3-star's desk.
Right.
But being screened at every step of the way. And you've got to, if you want your writing to be appreciated, you got to get good at it quick.
Yeah. And keep it all simple sentences.
Well, I learned that part right there, Pete, the hard way.
Yeah.
One of my instructors was like, "Weren't you a 96 Romeo?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Can you understand that sentence?" I said, "No." He said, "Write it so a Romeo can understand it and you'll never fail." And I was like, he's right.
Yeah.
It's got to be simple. Got to be simple, but it's got to convey. It's not easy.
Yeah.
It's not easy.
It's not easy.
Folks hear that, hear us talking about writing and think, how can it be that difficult? It's tough.
It is. It's very difficult. And you need a lot of agent's notes where you're like, hey, I got to give you some context here, because even when you write something clear as a bell, like you have to understand this is the 15th time I've seen this,
It's an innuendo, exactly. And there's, you can't, unfortunately, we don't, you can't red flag too many reports, because if you keep red flagging your reports, then none of them are important.
Right. I want to get to Joseph Grant's written a great comment here. So I have heard that overt action affects the covert environment. When you leave the wire, are you hoping to induce detectable movement from a foreign intelligent asset that are working against us? So I have an answer for that, but I want to hear your answer.
Yeah, I think as a matter of course, as an agent, you're always, no matter what, kind of loosely doing a counter surveillance. There are times that you'll do nothing but an SDR. You won't have any other mission, and your mission is just to see what's going on. It really, I think, to your question, Joseph, I think what matters most is the true environment that you're in. Certainly, like in the Balkans, I don't think anybody drilled down enough to realize who our teams were when we were leaving the wire with different convoys. I just don't think, we were in there early enough that I don't think there was any organized effort against us. Was there disorganized collection? I'm sure there was. Was there people eventually going, hey, I always see those guys in the marketplace and no other Americans come to the marketplace? I'm sure there was. Are you hoping to detect it or to create that, that moment where you can find it? Sure. But you got to be able to detect it and know what to do when you detect it. And that's just seeing it isn't, it's certainly it's part of the puzzle, but knowing what to do when you do detect that and trying to figure out where you go with it, that's not an easy task.
Yeah. In the overt world, we're forced to deal with certain parameters. The covert has its limitations too. Yeah. And when you go out, you're forcing action. And so even if there is covert collection, that's not really my job, is to worry about that. It might become my job, but that would require other things to be like, hey, we're going to redirect this asset this way, right? And so hopefully there's a theater asset that would be focusing on that. And then is directing any kind of intelligence towards us, whatever us is that actually actionable?
Yeah,
maybe. The other thing I would say to that is by being an overt collector, the way I look at that is if Pete isn't coming up in other people's intel report, like I don't exist on the battlefield, so I've got to be even more overt. I've got to be more present. So they're like, hey, we're getting collection reports that you've been targeted. Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
Now I got a number on my back. I'm in the game now.
Exactly. I'm one of the players. Yeah, I'm not.
Right.
I'm trying to get my varsity letter, and I just haven't been there yet. Yeah. No, I agree with that completely. Yeah.
And that presence allows other people to do whatever they're going to do, or at least knows that you're. And if you just continue to tackle things, you're doing your job. And if someone needs you to stop tackling that and tackle this,
exactly right. I think that probably the most valid point is exactly that. We didn't necessarily or don't create our own taskings at all. We're tasked, and you could be. When I was in Egypt, I did one of the Bright Stars, and my team was in the port of Alexandria, and we had another team that I forget where they were at. But I got all of a sudden on my cell phone, I had a little text that said, "Get back to the base camp immediately." You didn't question it; just did it.
Yeah.
It was because one of the other teams had gotten picked up. They got arrested. So. Every great plan survives first contact. That's about it. Taskings change. You don't know why you're getting tasked. Certainly, there usually are going to be theater level assets that are doing the covert. And if they're doing it, doing their job well, then you do get told, hey, you guys look like idiots. Don't do that.
I would also say too, if you are in the sergeant majoring business or the commander business and your team gets picked up, understand that is a cost of doing business. I'm not justifying bad behavior, but you have to allow a little bit of bad behavior.
Well, the thing is, even if it's not bad behavior, if a team gets picked up, because we had a team in Egypt that got picked up, and they weren't doing anything wrong.
Right.
They were doing exactly what we were supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But a local police chief got a little antsy and had him picked up. Nothing came of it, and I agree completely that it's like when you pay. I used to pave roads. When you pave roads, at the end of the day, your scree has got sometimes 1,900 pounds of gravel still in it, blacktop still in it. You can't put it back, so you got the cost of doing business. That you're overrun. There were overruns in counterintelligence, and that's one of them. And honestly, anytime I've ever been anywhere where a team got hemmed up for anything, to their credit, our commanders never really had an issue with it.
Right.
I know there are some that would, but again, that's defeating the purpose.
Right. Yeah. And maybe you get brought back to the flagpole and that's the rest of your deployment. But you still get the good rating and everything else. Like, hey, this has happened. I did a civilian job doing surveillance. This is for law enforcement. And so I was just sitting in my car and I was in the appropriate spot to be one of the backups to the backups. I was in the exact spot I was supposed to be, not doing anything wrong. But I'm still sitting in a community. And so someone calls the cops. We'd already called the cops to deconflict. And they said, hey, there's a guy sitting in his truck in front of my house. I've not done anything wrong. Like, what else am I supposed to do? I can't just walk around the neighborhood. Even if I did, they'd be like, "There's some guy walking
Yeah,
around the
that'd be
neighborhood,"
weirder, right, exactly. Yeah,
and then I'm not in my car ready to respond. And so, this was a normal thing. And then some of the guys in the detail are like, "Haha, you got spotted," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm in my car
yeah, I'm doing
in
what
a
I was.
neighborhood."
What should I have done? Duck down? Every time a car
Yeah,
goes by, you
yeah.
start doing the head duck?
Right. It has nothing to do. And actually, of all those people, I had done the most legitimate surveillance. And I'm like, the reason why I'm at where I'm at is because I told you we don't all need to be in this. It was like a subdivision with one way in, one way out in terms of vehicles, right? And keep in mind, the guy who's on the target is sitting 100 feet from that guy's house on a cul-de-sac in his car.
Yeah,
So
it's
everybody
smart.
knows he's there
Yeah,
too. Just nobody called the
yeah,
cops. Some of this overt stuff is fine though, right? It's like there is a presence, and your job is to be present,
you have to be that
so
present.
that they know that you are present, right?
That's
And we
right,
don't
yeah,
need to be covert. And there's a whole covert side of things. This
yeah,
is what's amazing about counterintelligence is that there's all these different aspects of who's doing what and what they're doing.
yeah, 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 and that, that hits the nail on the head. A lot of what we do is compartmentalized, and maybe your whole job that day was to get caught, was to
Yeah.
get found out. That's okay. And if you never find that out, that's okay too.
Hmm.
One of the things that this job taught me for sure is you have to have a very short memory for bad stuff.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. If you have a career as an agent and you do not get hemmed up for something,
Hmm.
I would question how enthusiastically you were doing your job.
You retire as a warrant officer, you do well. There's nothing like that's incredible, right? To be able to do that and to be a counterintelligence agent your entire time. What would you have done if you could have managed your own career? If the virtual you set a branch and said, I want
Um,
John to go here, I want John to get this course, I want him
yeah.
to have this assignment. And I'm not saying make
No,
like a
no,
cherry thing.
no.
I'm just how do you improve it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know because honestly, I didn't see any of the potential assignments in counterintelligence as bad assignments.
Hmm.
Um, the only one, honestly, believe it or not, and you know this, that I ended up losing my mind at was at Huachuca. I couldn't. I was like this. Garrison was killing me.
Yeah.
Um, I, yeah, I don't know that in my own personal circumstance. I don't think it could have gotten better. I had an amazing career.
I'm going to raise my hand because I know I could have fixed your career a little bit. Um, because you ran sources and you just did Bosnia under our new way of doing these things, I would have put Pete and John in
Right.
the CIFSO course,
Yeah, exactly.
and probably whoever's ran a source. I want to pack that school with
Yeah,
people,
yeah,
and I want to double the budget because I have
yeah.
access to fresh training.
Sure,
So
sure.
let's get
Yep.
more classes
Yep.
through. Let's get
And
these
what's
guys
funny
more
is
role players.
and when I first got to the schoolhouse, Pete, the mindset was the exact opposite.
Yeah.
I'm not going to mention his name, but he was one of the senior warrants at the schoolhouse,
Hmm.
and he said, "I heard you ran sources," and I said, "Well, not not in the traditional sense. We kind of recreated how things can be done."
Yeah.
And he scoffed and walked away. And I thought, "You pompous,"
Yeah.
because he wasn't there.
Hmm.
Uh, and he was somebody who had CIFSO training, but it was like just because necessity is the mother of invention. We didn't
Yeah.
have time to do the things the way that they would normally be done by the book. Oh, and by the way, we also weren't trained. You know, we weren't CIFSO trained, so
Yeah.
we had to figure it out, read the regs. Like this kind of all ties back in wonderfully. Read the regs, know what you
Yeah.
can do, and stay within. Stay on the right side of legal. Bend it a little bit. Well, bend it a lot.
Hmm.
Massage legal.
Yeah. Know when you're bending it though. Like, hey,
Yeah.
we're gonna
Know
take
when
this
you're
risk, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you got to know when you got to know where your where that line is. I made a career out of pushing that line, but
Right.
um, but that's what gets you the opportunity to go do the things you want to do. But no, I agree with you completely. Take the folks that just did this stuff because it is
Yeah.
perishable.
Right.
Everything that you do is perishable,
Yep.
and the shelf life on information is not as long as people think it is.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
as we adapt to how we do collection, the enemy's adapting to how they counter it. And,
Yeah.
we got to stay on top of that.
Boy, and how about let those guys evolve the doctrine too
Yeah,
that we're working
exactly.
from, who are at
Exactly.
that course. When we ran sources, they were in the book,
Mhm.
and nobody cared. Nobody said thanks. Nobody acknowledged it. I didn't think it was a big deal, you
Yeah.
know. And then we did a mobile training for CIPSA. We went over to Georgia to the fort where they have a lot of intel
Yeah.
people. And I saw Jason Wood, if you remember Jason Wood.
Yeah. I remember Jason.
And he said, Pete, I'm so glad you're in this course. And I'm like, oh, thanks. I mean, I know who you are, but like, what does that mean? He's like, you realize you and McGowan ran the first two legitimate sources under the new regulation. You're in the perfect spot. And I'm like, I am?
I didn't know that.
Nobody told me. And I'm like, oh, because my chief didn't know or respect what I had done. I never met the chief at the schoolhouse, so that guy couldn't have known what I'd done.
Yeah.
I didn't know what I'd done. But if I had known, I would have been like, let me pay more attention. How did we do this? How did it go? What would but nobody.
Yeah,
I got married.
I agree completely. I didn't realize until towards the end of my time at Huachuca, my packet's in, I'm getting ready to go to warrant officer school. And then all of a sudden, some of the warrants that, we worked with in Germany and are showing up, and they're like, oh man, you guys did this, you did that, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Like, I remember when you were in Granachitz and you were crazy. And I'm like, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But
I didn't know I was doing it.
we didn't know. And we didn't realize that folks out of the 165th were good at it. If you remember, we had done some, not a lot, but we had done some surveillance training. We had done some SDR stuff.
Right.
And I think that helped folks at least, you're not going to get proficient doing an SDR once every 8 months. But I think it at least got folks in the mindset that it's serious stuff. And I think that helped.
When I was talking to Brian Zach, he brought up a great point. He's a warrant. He's been to FCITIC, and he's going out, and he felt like they were in a particularly hot area. Now, we're all going to feel that way, but he's like, it's hard for me to give an E4 the reins because they're not ready. And this is the major leagues. I can't get you too many at bats, kid, because no one's prepared you for this, to include himself, right? Yeah. And so I thought about that, and I'm like, you're right. Like, you have to create a ramp for young agents so that when you are going out, like, hey, I want you to go talk to that vendor right there while I go and do my real work over here, or whatever it is. You've got to build that on the fly, on the field.
Yep. And again, once they ring the deployment bell, it's too late to train.
Right.
And if there's not some training ahead of time, I think that's the most important thing we can do for any young soldiers is get them to a point of confidence in their own abilities.
Right. And tell them, hey, you're good at this.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. I'm all about the tough love. I'm not.
Yeah.
But you can certainly do that the right way.
Yeah.
And build people up the right way. And yeah, absolutely. The Bosnia, if nothing else, I think was a turning point in counterintelligence, tactical counterintelligence.
Agreed. Yeah.
Because it taught folks that the status quo, the agents in combat zones in trench coats looking around corners don't exist anymore.
Right.
Certainly everything has gotten way more complicated, and people's abilities have changed. So we had to adapt. And I think that, we were very fortunate to be in the position we were in.
Yeah. And come out as well as we did too, because it's not every team is lucky. Yeah,
absolutely. That I felt for the teams that never got off Camp Bondsteel and never got off, I forget, I don't even remember Tuzla, Maine.
Yeah.
Folks that never were able to get off. I'd show up every Sunday to drop off reports.
Yeah.
And I'd be covered head to toe in mud. Vehicle looked horrible. And I'd see people like, I remember seeing Holzclaw down in Tuzla, Maine, and he was like, man, I wish I could go out humming with you guys. I'm like, Paul, we're not just like four-wheeling around the countryside. It looks like it, but we're not.
Yeah. This is a big point, man. what we do is and looks fun, but I always say to my friends, like, if you were to see me working, you wouldn't know I was working, but I
Yeah,
promise I am working.
exactly.
I'm going to be
Yep.
exhausted afterwards. Talk a little
Yeah.
bit about like the appearance of it,
Yeah,
and again, like, how do you
that's one of
manage
the
that?
hardest, yeah, that is one of the hardest things because you have to develop that toolkit in your brain. It's like a tool chest. And when you're going through how you would normally run through gathering intel from somebody, you have to, in most circumstances, they're going to offer you alcohol. You got to learn how to manage that without blurring the mind. Because every time they answer something or something comes up, you have got to remember the details. You know, I think I would kick back more reports for lack of detail than anything else. And so sitting, in any, whether it's in a bar, whether it's in a, wherever the meet restaurant,
Right.
Sitting there and having to make those verbal commands in your brain. Remember that,
Yeah.
and then repeat it to yourself while you're holding the conversation and not looking anything different than you did 5 seconds ago. It's tough. It's hard. Those are hard skills. And I don't even
Where
know.
is the training course for
Yeah,
that,
I
right?
I don't even know that there's a training course for that. That is definitely like frying pan into fire stuff.
Oh my God. And you're looking at the other person, hopefully someone there next to you, and you're like,
Always.
what happened next?
Yeah,
You know?
that's honestly, that's one of the things. That's a great technique too that I used with my guys. They would be within earshot, certainly.
Mhm.
And I would be able to I'd say, hey, listen, I remember he said this, but I got a little cloudy on XYZ, and
Mhm.
have them fill in the blanks for sure. Because
Mhm.
it's not like it's not like the old CIA movies where you got a little tape recorder that you're putting in your pocket. No, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this just goes back to the thing that I'm really big on, the interpreter part. Like, your interpreter needs to know whatever kind of interpreter they are, you've got to brief them like, hey, we have to write a report afterwards. I need you paying attention, not just translating.
Yeah.
You're going to have to help me remember what was
Yeah.
said, give me the context, all of these things so that I can do the best representation of what just happened.
And if you're
in
lucky,
my report.
your interpreter could be an intel guy. And
If you're lucky.
I had one interpreter that was an intel guy.
Yeah.
And he thank goodness, that made things so much easier, because I certainly didn't speak. I know enough Serbo-Croatian to get thrown in jail. That's about it.
I can say drink beer and stop or I'll shoot, and that's about it.
I don't even say stop or I'll shoot. I don't know that one. I fire a warning shot over the shoulder. So
Not there. Do you want to ask me anything? I've been leading the conversation.
Yeah. So your advice to a knuckle dragging ground pounder like I was, what would you have said to me if I came to your unit,
Yeah.
and said, hey man, I want to be an agent?
Yeah.
The
first thing I would say to you is you know how to be a soldier already, and you're going to be one of the best soldiers in this unit. And I am literally saying this to you, right? You and Paul Holtzclaw, you guys had the experience. Right. So knock that shit off. Now you got to make sure that we're tactically proficient enough. Like, let's spend 10% of our time. I mean, I don't know. Look, John, we did alert assemble upload as sergeant's time over and over. You know why? Because it was easy, and the people who were leading us were cowards and were soft.
Yeah.
Just being honest about that, right? So I want you to focus on learning how to talk to people, how to remember conversations, how to be friendly, and like, I want you to do these things more than anything else, because when push and shove come together, you need to be so valuable to the commander that he's desperate to get you off the camp.
Yeah.
And then we'll teach you how to, like, talk to commanders, talk to sergeant majors, that kind of thing, which, again, this should be part of what we do, because even like Colonel Vivon, it's not a knock on Colonel Vivon, it's just an example. Here's a guy who's infantry focused, has an infantry unit within his intel battalion, and he would do things like, you have relaxed grooming standards when you're off the Aschaffenburg camp, which is bullshit. Like, quit fucking around. These guys have a hard job.
I know.
And so being able to grab that commander and say, hey, pay attention, enable me, don't hinder me. And I would tell John that young guy.
Listen, that's what we should put out the CI Bible for folks just coming into the field, because there's such a broad mix of the things. Because I would tell somebody, like I said earlier, listen and learn, listen and learn, listen and learn.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. Don't worry about the tactical stuff. You know, you've already got that, and you know, your boy's going to be a stud,
right?
And from that respect,
yeah,
making sure that transitioning is so hard, you know, and especially when you're coming in as an agent, you know, when you're switching your MOS to be, if you're outside the intel world, you're coming into being an agent, it's daunting. It seems like this, you know, when you look at the subject matter and that syllabus, and it's, you know, one bite at a time. It is definitely the elephant. You know, that was the longest school I ever went to. Was the agent's course, but it could have even been longer, and probably should have been.
Probably should have been. Yeah.
There especially, you know, I felt like going through the course, they were filling these kids' heads with, you know, you're going to be acidic, you're going to be, you know, FISA, you're going to, and I'd be like, no, they're not.
Right.
First of all, they're, you know, half of them are under 21 anyway. They're going to be doing, you know, PMCSs in the motor pool so they can get creds, and they still got to cut their teeth and learn their craft. You know,
and who's doing that?
Yeah, exactly.
Who's leading that? Yeah,
exactly. Who's going to teach them all that? So
not the people that are trying to sham out like, oh no, sergeant's time, this is when I leave, or whatever it is. You know, absolutely. One of the things when I was thinking about the Aschaffenburg training thing that we did, don't even bring in MKT to, by the way, for anybody listening, MKT is a tactical kitchen, and they make chow in there for you. Don't make them eat MREs. Don't make them do stupid soldier. Don't make them do legitimate soldier stuff.
Yeah.
When you get there, it's like, hey, chief, whoever, me and my sub team, we're going into town. We're going to go, you know, we're going to go meet a German family.
Yeah, exactly.
And write a report on that.
We're going to strike up a conversation.
Yeah.
We're going to find 3 strangers. You're going to tell me which stranger to meet, and you're going to tell me what I have to come back to you with.
Yeah.
And you know, it's so funny. There's a guy that was a CI guy when I was a 96 Romeo, and it was the last time. This was actually Fort Chaffee when JRTC was at Chaffee.
Yeah.
And we had a company commander who foolishly, we had to do 2 rotations because the battalion that we were supporting was, I forget where they were rotating out to, and we weren't going with them, so we were supporting the next battalion coming in. So we did 2 full rotations. We talked this first sergeant into letting us go off post to do laundry. He knew there was a laundromat on post, so basically this was his fault. Long story short, 9 hours later, we come back extremely drunk. As with us, and we watched him mess with this guy in this bar so bad. The dude thought that guy was his long lost son. Guy knew everything about this guy's life. He's telling us on the way back, oh, he was born here. And it was watching him do it.
Yeah.
I was like, he's just having a conversation. And that was really, you know, that was like when I first started going, I could do that. And that job doesn't look hard. It looks fun. And it is fun.
It is fun.
But the hard part, and I still don't know how he did it because we were drunk. I don't know how he remembered all that information about the guy.
Right.
It was crazy.
But think about the training impact of that one thing that wasn't supposed to happen. What if that was designed? Like you repeated it, you know?
I'm a huge proponent of baptism under fire. And if you can, and necessarily under fire, you know, like we did it was Frankfurt, where we did the SDRs and all that. You take Frankfurt's a massive city for Germany. Take an entire field office and drop them off, you know, all over the city, all with the same requirements. This is what you have to get from a person,
right?
And they have to write a whole bio. You know, do as much as you. I think that was me this time.
That could be. I don't know. Either way, we're getting there. I agree. Like just working on those skills and really focusing on that part and getting agents off the camp and off the post
yeah,
because you have to teach that initiative, right? You have to teach that
they got to be
courage.
in. They've got to be. It's human.
Hmm.
You can't have human without human, and you've got to get yourself in somebody's face,
Yeah.
and learn how to do it, so you don't get your teeth knocked out, and I mean that figuratively and literally.
Yeah.
You don't want to. Nobody wants to get chained 2 feet from the flagpole.
Ugh,
You want to know
yeah.
the flagpoles protect you, but you don't want to get chained to.
Yeah. Hey, this was awesome. I really enjoyed it talking about all these things. We
Oh,
kept the positive,
always,
and
man.
I dig it. What's when you think about the most fun you ever had as a counterintelligence agent? What was that?
Oh boy, let me think. There was a lot of a lot of crazy. Honestly, it had to be in Egypt. When
A Bright Star?
yeah, yeah, we got hooked up because of where we were at. I got hooked up with my DMI, Defense Ministry Intelligence counterpart. So it was like even more legit. Now in Egypt, if you get called to see counterintelligence agents, sometimes you don't go home. So there was a very different connotation to us being with those guys. And we went down to the pyramid. General Franks wanted soldiers to see the pyramids. Now,
Yes.
this was back in the Muslim Brotherhood was fledgling. They were just getting started. And I had done enough work and said, man, there's a presence near the pyramids. We really shouldn't be letting soldiers go wandering around. And so, we're in the briefing, and I was a W1, Pete. So,
Yeah.
this took some brass cojones.
Yeah.
They're talking about doing these morale, welfare, recreation visits all over Egypt. And Tommy Franks was like, is there anybody that thinks they shouldn't? I raised my hand. And he didn't even call me chief. He called me Mr. What's your problem, mister? And I was like, well, sir. And I laid it out for him. And he goes, I don't give a if I want U.S. soldiers to see pyramids, they're going to see goddamn pyramids. And I was like, it's on you, sir. No worries.
Yeah. You asked.
So we went down. We went down to do a vulnerability assessment, and there was a line of probably 300 or 400 people waiting to go into, Khufu's pyramid.
Yeah.
And the DMI guy goes up to the dude running the when you go, I don't know if you've ever been to the pyramid, but you go
I have.
He goes up to the guy who's like weeding people in, has us climb up the front. You know how they have you climb up the side and go, no, has us climb up the front. They shut down the pyramid for an hour and a half for us to go in alone. 4 of us in the pyramid alone for an hour and a half. It was amazing. I'm literally the sarcophagus. I'm sitting there with my hands on it, looking inside of it, going,
yeah,
this is stuff that, and of course, no camera, but I'm like, man, this is stuff that absolutely, those are memories that you should never, most people never do that in their lives.
Yeah.
And I think about that entire trip to Egypt, and I will go back one day. 2 places I will go back to. I'll go back to Bosnia. I need to do a visit. And I will go back to Egypt. For sure.
I want to tell my Bright Star story.
Go ahead. What you do?
You'll appreciate it. Well,
were we on the same one? I think we were.
I don't. Maybe it's possible. I don't. No, we weren't. It couldn't have been. So, I had left the Army. I came back in through the reserves, and I just started to connect to the intel unit that was in Chicago. That was a neighbor to the unit. I was in a transportation unit. I was.
Sure though. I think what year was this, Pete?
This was immediately after 9/11. So this is October of 01.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm in a transpo unit, and I think at that point I had completed AIT to become an 88 in November, with always the intention of sliding over to Intel.
Right.
So they deploy us. This is post 9/11. First big deployment of anybody was this Bright Star exercise, and so we get there, and there's 2 E6s. Now I'm supposed to be in E6, but none of these guys know me. They don't respect me. So they laugh and say how they've divided the day into night shift, day shift, and they've given me no real job. And I'm like, oh man, that's terrible. Oh, you guys really got me this time. Oh boy. The whole time I'm like, you think you're playing checkers and you got me in checkers. However, I'm going to go to the CI office. So I go up to the CI office, and there's a lieutenant there, and he's spitting. And I'm like, hey, sir, how you doing? My name's Pete. I just got out of the Army in 99. I was a counterintelligence agent. I ran sources. I taught at the CIFSO course. Maybe I can help you. I'm not gainfully employed in my transportation unit. They just told me they don't have a job for me. And so I'd love to offer my services. And he's like, yeah, right. But I've got a book about Alan Dulles in my hand, like this thick. Like who else but an intel guy would be reading about Alan Dulles?
Exactly.
And I said, fair enough. I wouldn't believe me either, but let me poke my head and maybe I'll know somebody. It's a small world. And he's like, yeah, go ahead. And this is like a butter bar, right? Like he has no idea. I poked my head and I looked down the corner and I forget who it was, but it was the other chief that was like Chief O'Connell, my boss at Huachuca. It was the other guy that was kind of like him. And I can't remember his name. If I don't think about it, it'll come to me. But he looks and he goes, Pete. And I'm like, Chief. And I said his real name because I don't remember what it is. And he's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I'm in a transportation reserve unit and I don't have anything to do. And he's like, I work for the boss. I'll write a memo right now. You're working for me. And I've got a great job. You'll have no responsibility. I just want you to oversee my young agents and make sure that they don't get themselves in trouble and make sure that they know what to do. You don't have to write any reports. You don't have, that's their job. Make them do all of it. You're just going to oversee. And so he kind of gave me an overall, little more full briefing later on. I look back at that lieutenant, by the way, and he's like, how the fuck did that just happen? My job was to go on those MWR trips.
Yeah.
And my partner ended up becoming Dr. Zawas, who at the time was the senior Ministry of Egyptology.
I met Zahi when I was there.
Yeah. Yeah. I met
him at the Cairo Museum.
Yeah, he was wonderful. So he was at the pyramids when I met him. Amazing. And so you must have done great liaison work. He's like, oh, I know exactly, because he totally was comfortable with who I was and what I was doing. And he said, I need to show you all of the security measures that are here and why it's important.
I met Zahi because we had to do the vulnerability assessment at the Cairo Museum. And and the first time I meet the man, and as is typical of many older Muslim men, gave me a big hug, not a handshake,
right?
Big hug, and can I show you my friend? And we had the first day I met him, I ended up being late to go back to the base camp. Ended up having dinner with him and my team in Cairo. It was amazing. The guy is amazing, brilliant. I mean, a mind like I couldn't even understand, but an awesome guy. I can't. That's amazing. See, I learned something new, something else about.
But your work, for sure, fed into my success as well, right? And so because he understood what I needed, he pointed it. He's like, I'm not going to point at him, but do you see all those guys in these outfits? Those guys are with us, and they're all instructed: forget the artifacts, protect the humans.
Yep.
I was like, damn, this was in the museum. He's like, look at the okay. And so he took like all the stuff that you probably asked him about for the vulnerability assessment in the museum. He took us out. He's like, it was incredible.
He probably went, they dinged me on this last time. I needed to fix this. No, he was amazing. He was so outgoing, so gregarious, so friendly. And I think that's the hardest thing with this job is you meet and forge relationships with some insanely, just folks that most people would never,
right.
They're like, you knew the minister of antiquity in Egypt? Yeah, it was great. Every time I see a documentary, I'm like, I knew him.
I know that guy. He came to my hometown and he gave a speech. The schedule didn't work out, but I wanted to go pop in on him. So now you and I have to go pop in on him and go to Egypt.
He's amazing.
The other thing I want to say, and this is at the end of the show, so no one's going to hear this, but there are some people watching right now. If you are an intelligence agent or you're going to be one, here's what I want you to realize. Whenever you show up somewhere, there's probably been a John there before you. So John is doing his job in the blind well, so that when you show up, you've got a good relationship. It's on you to protect it. It's on you to develop it. But John and I worked in partnership without knowing because we're both pros.
Yeah, that's probably the best piece of advice you can give anybody. And I think that really, it's like a neon light in Intel, but it really should be across the military. Somebody else tried to leave it a better place for you. When the military gets all kinds of knocks on, only kids with, no education or no hope. That's such crap.
Yeah.
We have the brightest and best military in the world, and it's just because of dedicated individuals. You know, it really is, and you should be making it way better for the next guy, because that's really what you want. I mean, you just want it to keep, everything's got to keep rolling.
Oh, I love it. All right, well, listen, let me wrap this up. Stand by 1 sec. Thanks, everybody, for watching.
Hey,
Thank you.
thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you so much for watching.